Welcome everyone to Heart Snuggles. We hope you're having a good snuggly day, and I'm so excited that you're here listening with us. I brought a guest that I just met a little while ago, I think like a week ago at this amazing party that he hosted, and I'm so excited to have him on because I really loved his perspective on grief and just his energy in general. So I'm excited to share him with you guys, and go ahead and tell them who you are in a little intro.
Well, hello. My name is Daryl Henderson. I am, I'm a lot of things. I don't really like to define myself very much these days.
I know.
But yeah, I'm here. It was great to meet you last weekend. Super stoked to be here on the podcast with you, and even really more interested to talk about grief because I think it's such a topic that, it's something we all deal with at some point in life, and I just don't think we talk enough about it. I think so many of us experience it and have an experience of loneliness around it. And so hopefully we can illuminate some of that stuff today.
Yeah, and grief is so dynamic and is so many in so many parts of our life. Like we think it's just related to death, but it's so much grander than that. So yeah, I'm really excited to dive in. But let's start with what the question of the podcast is: what was the last random act of kindness someone did for you?
Random act of kindness someone did for me.
Yes.
Good question. Thinking about that one for just a moment.
Yeah, take your time. It's not something you think about often.
Really, a random act of kindness. Well, a friend took me to a show last night in Hollywood, which I hadn't been to in forever. She offered to take me. She's an actress, and it was a one-woman show that was really interesting and super dynamic and a lot of fun. That's probably the best thing I could come up with off the top of my head.
Amazing. That's so nice. And so
Or
fun.
being asked to come on this podcast. I also consider that an act of kindness.
Yay, yes. Thank you for sharing those. And so now let's get into grief. So maybe start off with like what grief means to you or how it showed up in your life. I guess, and maybe more in particular recently, because I know you've been going through some.
Yeah. Grief. What does grief mean to me? I really believe grief is a deep process of healing, actually. I don't see it as a negative thing or a bad thing, even though I would say most of my life I've avoided it. And recently, I went through a very intense and unexpected breakup with a partner of mine back in March. And it really rocked me to my core, honestly. We were headed for life partnership, building a family. And the truth is, I was about to ask this woman to marry me, and I don't think she knows that. But I was, things had gotten to a point where they were untenable, and it really ripped me open in a way that I wasn't expecting, or at some level, even it was possible, to be honest. And early on in the process, I realized how well I was very supported by the friends and community around me very early on. And so fortunately, I've been cultivating friendships and networks over the last 4 or 5 years specifically, and really making an effort to build my community. And because of that, I was incredibly well supported. And one of those friends of mine who was there in the beginning told me a quote from Rumi. And this particular quote has been one that has resonated with me through the whole experience. And the quote is, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens." And this having been the third pretty powerful breakup experience I've had in the last 6 or 7 years, I was just right there. I was ready to be cracked open. And the grief process this time, I would say it's actually the first time I've actually allowed myself to experience it. And that's been one of the hardest things I've ever done, honestly. And it's something I'm still in. It's something I'm still dealing with. I mean, even yesterday, I found myself watching this documentary, and just within about 30 seconds of the thing starting, for where something hit me about it, and I just started crying. And I've had lots of those moments of just layers of stuff coming up. And, the thing about grief is it's not, at least for me, hasn't been isolated to this one incident. I've had a lot of grieving over the relationship and the loss of it and the loss of the dreams associated with it and where the life I thought I was going to have and the life I thought we were going to have together, the dreams, all of it, and being that this is the first time that I've really allowed myself to be in the grief process, it's so much more has come up. I mean, I kind of feel like I've been grieving every relationship I've ever lost, and unfortunately I've lost a few and to some really amazing people, and they've all been pretty difficult. So it's been very multifaceted. Aspects of my childhood have come up where mourning some of the things I lost from early childhood trauma and things I didn't get to experience. So perhaps a long-winded response, but that's that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting you say that. Like, one, like you think, I mean, personally, I'm like, all right, I've grieved, I'm good, I've been through it, and then it's like, no,
it's not how it works, unfortunately. I mean, it's layered and layered, and it just sometimes it comes in waves, and I'll be fine, and then this whole last week, I've just kind of been like, meh.
Me too, yeah, and it's really interesting too, like you said, like it's like, all right, I open the box, I'm feeling it, I'm doing it, like I'm proud of myself, and then it's like poof, other stuff you haven't grieved comes up, and you're like, no, not this too. I'm ready dealing with this one thing. Like I don't want to add this into the pile, and so it's like, how do you hold space for all this that is there, and then like also not drown into it where you get stuck in like the really low.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. I think, well, what I was just talking about at the beginning is the support. I think that's one of the most critical and crucial things you could possibly have in your life. And now I am supported in many different ways. I am blessed and grateful to have mentors. I have people who I would consider spiritual mentors. My parents, honestly, the relationship I have with them is really sweet, and they've been such a huge support for me. I had friends that I was close with, but this process has made us, brothers, really, in a lot of ways, and has brought up a lot of that. But also, I made sure to seek professional support. I've got a therapist and that I've been working with, and I can honestly say that's been one of the most crucial things. So even if you don't have all that other stuff in your life, I think it's really important to acknowledge the power of a therapeutic relationship with somebody you can trust, because that is such a powerful tool. And in particular, one of the things I've really been digging into is a modality of therapy called EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprogramming or reprocessing. It's one or the other. I don't remember which at the moment. Doesn't matter. It's a somatic therapy, so it's a brain and body-based therapy that is really beautiful, because a lot of talk therapy, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and a lot of other modalities out there can help you get to the root of something and understanding what happened. For me personally, the issue has been that I understand a lot of what's happened to me in my life. I understand my early traumas. I've been in this self-development, self-exploration process for well over 20 years at this point. So I've done a lot of digging. I've done a lot of looking. But if you don't address what's happening in the body, it ultimately, I'm not going to say it's useless, because I think it's very valuable to have that information, but you're probably still going to be left with the responses from within, right? And those reactions and everything else. And that's what I was dealing with. And that's one of the things that I've struggled with in my romantic relationships in particular, is my reactivity and my anger and things due to things that happened to me as a child. And I need to feel like I need to defend myself, and that if I feel attacked or feel somebody's talking down to me, whatever it is, I can have a very strong reaction to that. And all of that's coming from this place, this feeling in the body. So EMDR and these somatic therapies help us to process that out naturally, because it's been proven that trauma can get stuck in the body and stuck in the nervous system, because human beings are so powerful in our brains. It's one of the things that distinguishes us from other creatures on the planet, is we're able to subvert nature's natural process of getting rid of trauma, which often is a version of shaking or literally shaking it off. I mean, there's a wonderful book called Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine that talks about this, and talks about how they tracked polar bears in the Arctic, and what they noticed when they were tranquilizing these polar bears, they were basically using a helicopter to track them, and they would use a tranquilizer gun from the helicopter. So naturally the bear is scared because it's being chased by a helicopter. It gets shot with a tranquilizer, and then they noticed when it started to come back to, it would be covered breathing, and it would start pawing and shaking, and it's a very kind of vigorous movement as it would come to, and then at a certain point it would just go, and then it would just relax. The bear gets up and walks off, and it's fine, right? These reactions get caught in us because we're so smart, we're so intelligent that we're able to trap it. And so if you don't deal with that, even grief, that process can really get elongated. So I think working with therapeutic work is probably one of the most valuable things you can do, but also just get yourself supported with friends and family and people you can call, people who you love and trust, and, aren't going to judge you if you just call them up and be like, I'm just having a shitty day. Like, I'm tired. I want to cry, or like I'm angry. And I think the other piece is the anger, right? And then letting yourselves be angry too sometimes. It's natural.
Yeah. So many things.
We do is that's difficult.
Yes. So many things to that. One thing I love is like the body doesn't know time, and remembering that truth is so important, because like our bodies are, like you said, like we have these things stuck in us, and our body can't tell the difference between the present and the past. Like you can be reacting from a past version or like past hurt, but like your body can't tell the difference. And so honoring that is really, really important. And also, I love what you said about calling your friends, and importance of being held is, I've found, one of the most beautiful things to receive, when you can really ask for support when you need it, and allow yourself to be held when you need to be held, and to express your emotions with other people. I think it's co-regulating, when you can have someone that is grounded and their nervous system is calm and their nervous system is safe, and that like shows you that you can feel that way as well, especially because most of our traumas are in relationships. So like having that, and then also with anger, like we need to express anger, and it's never, it's hard to do so, because anger can be so closely associated with like aggression or something more hurtful or whatever. But at the same time, anger, just like grief, is an emotion that needs to be expressed and is healthy and is normal. And so helping people, like recently I've been really supporting my friends, like anytime they're frustrated, anger, I'm like, go punch a pillow, go scream into the pillow, like allow yourself to experience sacred rage. Like it is an essential part of life. And so I'm really grateful that you've been able to do that as well, because like the reason that we overreact in certain situations is we have this anger that hasn't been able to be released safely. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that you mentioned this a few times, that this time you felt like you actually grieved. And I've been feeling that too in the past month. And so I think it'd be good to talk about the difference between what you thought you grieved before and how you're truly grieving now, in case someone has never felt the difference.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. In the past, what I would do was, if I was really upset about something, or was a loss of something, I was heartbroken, a lot of what I would do is there would be anger, there would be upset, I would talk about it, I would go over things, but it was a lot of pointing the finger in the other direction. And so there was a lot of like, yeah, they did this, da, 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 and then like I would be responding to that, right? That they did something to me. And therefore, I would make all my justifications and reasons and come up with great stuff and stories and all kinds of things that were just meant at making myself feel better while still blaming them. And then I would go out and I would do things that I found empowering, right, at the moment in reaction to those particular instances. And, like one time I got out of this relationship and I just went out and I went on a dating rampage because I was like, forget this, whatever, I'm awesome. I was deprived,
Yeah.
all these things, and I deserve to be loved and paid attention to and all this stuff. And so I swear to God, I think I was dating like 5 people at the same time. It was ridiculous. It was really ridiculous, right? When I look back at it, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? But I did that stuff. And through doing that stuff, it was distracting enough that I made myself feel better. And then ultimately, one of those things and one of those people that I met turned into something else. Right. And, and I hate to say this thing out, but there's the whole like, with the word, urban legend. It's not really an urban legend. I don't know the saying, but the saying is like the best way to get over the last one is get under the next one. Right. Like there's that whole thing. It's so toxic. And also, are we allowed to curse here for the record?
Definitely.
Like, okay, cool. Yeah, it's total bullshit.
Yes.
It's total bullshit. And it really just like, it's a momentary Band-Aid to fill the validation need. And that's ultimately what I discovered in this whole process this time so the difference was, well, I'm going to get back to the validation piece in a minute, but the difference was that before I was pointing fingers elsewhere and I made myself feel better through distractions and everything else. And so I thought I would be going through it and then then I'd get over it and I would move on. But ultimately, all this crap was still in me. And it was just stacking and stacking and stacking. And I didn't know it ultimately. And it was one of the reasons that I was so volatile in my relationships, because I never really allowed myself to process the pain and to really, really, really feel lost.
Mm-hmm.
And to really, really feel deeply, this really, there's no other way to call it, but my own inadequacy. And the pain that I had around that, about not being good enough, about being left, about being abandoned and being alone. And I was just kept recreating the story over and over and over again. And I think the difference this time is after this breakup happened, I made a very distinct choice. I was like, whatever patterns that got me here, they're over. This is done. And whatever I have to do to clean and clear that out, that's what I got to do. And so I got myself back into men's work and men's groups. I had been waning on that for quite some time. I hadn't been participating in men's work as like I used to. I got myself into a mode of therapy that I had been wanting to work with more and hadn't. And specifically the somatic therapy, because I learned and just kind of knew that I've been around the block. I understand a lot of my issues. Now there's always more to discover, and we're never done. But I had at least a pretty good sense of where it was, but I couldn't just touch the emotional piece. So then allowing myself to cry uncontrollably, to feel pain, and to learn to be okay on my own, because I needed those other relationships, because at the time I needed the validation.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know that, but like I needed somebody to fill that void, and because there's this very deep fear of being alone, and ultimately dying alone. I think really what it comes down to, and to not be loved and supported, and and once I let myself be messy and really break down with people and stop trying to have my shit together and pleasing everybody, then that's where a lot of the rubber has met the road here. I've let other people support me, and then I've been able to, which has uncovered a new level of honesty and a new interactions I'm having with women, and I'm not in a place really still to start a relationship, and I'm really clear about that, and I'm very honest about that. Where in the past, like I would have started something with somebody based off of usually physical attraction. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And we feel great together and we have great sex. Let's make a relationship. Right?
Yeah.
Sort of like getting to know somebody before really going in on something. You know?
Yeah, that's so important. And so not, everything you said, like who doesn't have a fear of, being alone and they're not good enough. It's like we all have these really deep underlying roots that are like, we're connected to, and we always are turning away from our pain. It's like, why can't we turn towards the pain? Like, why are we not leaning into what's continuously coming up and like being with that? And yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's more uncomfortable to not address it because it doesn't go away. And when you can actually be with it, it's like, that's when it transmutes and transforms into beautiful light and into something like that's when the space is created for new things to come in instead of repeating that same, experience to bring that same emotion up that you're avoiding. So,
yeah. And like, the thing is, it's like so many people settle these days.
Oh, I know.
And not just for relationships, but like for their careers, for their lives, and whatever that is, I just don't have that in me. And I'm grateful for that because it's made me really fucking tenacious.
Yeah, same.
Right? And it's really annoying sometimes because there's a part of me that was like, God, it'd be so much easier. But would it really, is what I ask myself. Like, would it really be that much easier? Because the reality is, there's a lot of people who have great lives. And they look, for all intents and purposes, to be good. And they have things. But at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of people I know and see that are really comfortable. I don't see deep love and compassion in the relationships they have with their partners and their families. Love is present, but the expression of it is dampened. When we dampen ourselves by not dealing with this stuff, and it's impossible to have those deep, honest, loving, compassionate relationships if you haven't done the work for yourself. I think I have had a very deep fear of intimacy that, frankly, I wasn't aware of. If I would have said this even a year or two ago, I'd have been like, you're full of crap, right? Whatever. I'm like, I've got plenty of evidence to show you I have no issues with intimacy. Look at all the relationships I've had. Look at all the people that, like it was a ruse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of my fears too. And another point, I also have that same thing where I'm like, I wish I could just be one of those people that settles. But then my therapist was saying like, and I was wishing upon other things, like, for instance, my family isn't that close and I constantly wish for some things, but she's like, do you truly, like, is that, if you had that, would that bring you more joy than you have now? And also like remembering that a lot of people don't know how good they can feel. And they think that where they're at is the best that they can feel, but they don't even know that they can be so much grander. And I think that's what I'm like, all right, I actually know and have experienced, maybe not like, into totality, but I have experienced that it can be better than that, and that it's worth continuing to trust myself and not settling.
Yeah. I am. One of my favorite questions is, how does it get even better than that?
Ooh, I like that.
How does it get even better than that? And what do I have to do to have things be even better than I could possibly imagine? Right. And as we do that, life becomes magical. Like, really, I think the gifts I've received through dealing with the grief process this time they're immeasurable. I am fundamentally altered by actually choosing to go through this. And I think ultimately that's what one has to do. It has to be a choice. Have to say, okay, enough is enough. Have to be tired of being tired of messing around, tired of being in pain. And sometimes it takes us an immense amount of suffering for us to come to that place. But if you can get there, it's a gift. Like, God damn it, I have every reason in the world to be so angry at my last partner,
Mm-hmm.
to cast her off and say nasty things about her. And in the past, I would have done that. But the reality is, she's been one of my greatest teachers. And it's a freaking hard pill to swallow. But it's also the truth. And I wouldn't have had many of the experiences I've had this year so far. And honestly, the relationship with my family is so deeply transformed through this experience that, like, if this had to happen in order for that to happen, so be it. Honestly, so be it. Because it's opened the door to a new level of compassion and understanding with my parents. Because, you know, I finally stopped putting the walls up between us.
That's very interesting. And I also love that too. It's like, continue to surrender and trust that like more good will come from this, and it's always hard to, when it initially happens, and even knowing that truth, like if you've been open and experienced this, like that will happen, but in those moments of fresh pain, it's really hard to connect to that and to remember that. And it's like, how can you stay trusting? Yeah.
In those moments of fresh pain, when it's searing and it's hot and it's all you can think about and feel, just the only thing I can say about that really is just focus on being okay in any given moment. Get the support necessary to make sure that that's okay and that you have yourself taken care of as fast as possible. Give yourself good food. Do the little tiniest things of self-care that you can, because in those moments nothing else matters, right? Like it's the pain is all consuming.
Yeah.
So it's the future, like forget the future. Because you'll get to it. So that's definitely something I learned in this particular process. And at some level, I was finally strong enough to deal with it too. So it took all the other crap I've done to get to a point where I was able to deal with it. And like you said, multifaceted. It's deep. The layers go all the way, down to the core parts of my childhood. So, and I really, really believe wholeheartedly that if you're only willing to just dip your toe into the darkness, if you can only peek in for a moment, you're not going to get a whole lot on the other side. Your ability to have light and shine light is directly proportionate to your ability to deal with your shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So, as the cliche goes, if you're in hell, keep going. Don't stop.
Mm-hmm.
The only way out is through. And there really is a lot of truth in that. It's just, many people know the archetype of the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think grief is our own hero's journey.
Yes. And that brings me to the point too, when we were in that conscious conversation, we were talking about how grief of like when someone was passing, how we often are not taking our responsibility in it, and like how we associate to how we feel about them leaving, but we're not thinking about their experience. And so I'd love for you to just touch on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in particular, and I think this relates to people leaving our lives in the relational sense and also in the physical sense, as in people actually passing along and dying, that it's so common for us to be so consumed by our own experience of no longer having that person in our lives and the pain of not having them there, that we don't consider as much what's on the other side of that, right? Like how often do we actually really, truly, and authentically try to put ourselves in our former partner's shoes, into what they must have experienced in order for them to act in the way that they did, right? So for me in particular, that's been a big thing. We're realizing that as much as I can judge the behavior that I received, and as painful as it was, I've chosen to acknowledge that there must have been an immense amount of pain on the other side of that for this person to act the way they did. It's the same thing with death. We miss the person, we want them, but like, are they better off? Right? Is their soul finally at rest and peace? Were they in pain? Were they suffering? And at some level, I think we all are. Like, I think that's part of the human experience that a lot of this neo-spiritual movement doesn't really acknowledge as much, right? And it's sad because even the most beautiful religious texts and that have been around for thousands of years talk a lot about this. Even the Buddha said, all life is suffering. And there's some truth to that. And I think there's so many people that want to step over that now, which is hence the avoidance of grief, because grief is a suffering process.
Big time.
And but by dealing with that, we really have an opportunity to move through into something else. Right? How can we transcend our own pain and sit with that in such a way that we can have compassion for others and their pain and what they must have been going through as well. And I think that's one of the hidden gems inside of grief, one of the hidden gifts that so often doesn't get acknowledged or even seen for that fact.
I don't know how. I'm like, it's been such a transformational experience for me to sit with those parts and just be. I think that's the key too, like to transform it. It's just being with it. It's like, you don't have to necessarily like fix the pain. It's just like, let the pain have a voice, let the pain be felt, and kind of the magic unfolds itself. But the more that you can hold that within yourself, the more that you can hold that for other people. Because for instance, my dad, like I'll tell him I'm going through something. He has no idea how to hold that for me. And so he'll like be like, oh, like he like freaks out, or he'll just change the subject, or he doesn't know how to hold space for it. And so originally like that used to like make me feel invalid in my pain and make me feel weird about my pain. But now I know to like go to people that can hold my pain. And now I'm able to hold that in other people. And it is the most beautiful gift when someone comes to you in pain or suffering and you're just let them be and help them bring it out. Like, wow, it's so amazing.
And without the need to fix it too.
Yeah.
Right. And as a man, that's totally one of our things. We want to fix it. We want to make it right. We want to make it feel better. Right. But the more we can just allow it to be there, I think the better off we are. And one of the things I've really shooting for in the events that I've been participating in and cultivating is, everything is welcome. All parts of you are welcome. And I think the community that we're in, there's a lot of spiritual bypassing. There's a lot of people that don't want to deal with the darker side as much. And it steps over the real human experience. And which is that we're all dealing with something. Everybody you meet. And so like, if you just know everybody you meet, they're dealing with something. And if they get sharp with you or they say something off or, you feel weird about it, it probably has nothing to do with you. So it's not taking things personally is a big piece of it, but it's acknowledging that like life is not all love and light.
Yeah.
I mean, it's beautiful. I love that. I think that's a place we want to get to, but that's just not where we're at. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, and part of human experience is pain and suffering. And so the more we try to resist that and get away with it, everything's beautiful. It's all light, man. Everything's good. And Shakti, Shakti. Like, look, don't get me wrong. I'm super woo-woo. I love that aspect.
Yeah.
But there's so much of that I find so fake. And honestly, when somebody looks at me and they say, oh, everything is beautiful and everything is love and light, I look at them and like in my head, I don't trust you because you're not telling the truth.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things I strive to bring. It's a level of honesty and realism, pragmatism to the spiritual conversation. And the more I learn about the spiritual conversation, like you said, it's not getting to some ecstatic, beautiful, over the moon place. Is that amazing? Yeah, but it's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
The most beautiful, deep understanding you could possibly have for life can come from the kitchen sink.
Mm-hmm.
You come from those little mundane moments, and getting to the other side of grief doesn't mean you're going to be happy-go-lucky and skipping along and running into the sunset. It could just mean you're okay in any given moment. And you're okay with your pain, even if it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's enough too. And just like taking some time, I've been trying to do this too, is celebrating myself for feeling that and for going there and
Mm-hmm.
having the capacity to be able to hold that. We don't believe in ourselves to be able to make it through pain. And so, yeah, just like honor yourself. Like it's okay if you cried and had a bad day and you didn't want to get out of bed, like if you're really low, like celebrating that you're still here and you're feeling that. And another thing I want to bring up too is like, I felt sometimes the most loved, like feeling that pain and being supported by someone else. Like I felt so much love in those situations and deepening in my relationships when you can experience that with other people.
Agreed. And to your point, I think particularly in Western and American society, we're so champion on individualism.
Ugh, yeah.
And separatists and being strong enough to do it on your own. But we weren't made that way. We're made to be in tribes. We're communal creatures. We can't survive without each other. I mean, a baby can literally not, you can feed the baby, you can get it everything it needs to sustain life. But if you don't give it love and attention, it will die.
Mm-hmm.
What does that say about who we are and our fundamental nature? We're meant to support one another. So so I think that's the other thing particularly I struggle with is like, if I'm not strong enough to do it on my own, I'm a weakling.
Mm.
But the truth is vulnerability and allowing other people to take care of you and support you, that takes real strength.
Me too. It's been the best. And yeah, Brene Brown definitely changed that for me with her books and her work. So I'm really grateful for her. And
she's incredible. Power of Vulnerability. Come on. That was a great one. If you haven't listened to it, anybody out there, totally go check it out.
Definitely. Yeah, it's so good. Okay, well, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm so grateful to be talking about this more. And like you said, like it is something that needs to be discussed more. And I find like when you do, it's like everyone can connect to grief. Like we've all experienced it. And even if you haven't put the words to it, like not realizing that ending a relationship is grief, like, you've experienced it. So thank you for being vulnerable today and for having the hard conversations. And
my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share and to what I deem to be of service.
It is of service. Yes, it totally is of service. Our voices are so powerful. And I think we forget that too. Like our truth touches so many people. And I wanted to start a podcast because so many times in my life was I listening to a podcast that like saved me in these moments when these were the exact words I needed to hear. And so podcasts are very powerful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much. And I hope whoever's listening gets something out of this.
Mm-hmm. And the last question I have to end out the podcast is, when was the last time that you made someone smile?
I don't know. I'm looking at you. You're smiling right now.
That worked.
But before that, it would have been this morning when I was hanging out with a friend of mine for breakfast, and I made her a cup of freshly made ceremonial cacao. Get a nice smile out of that.
Yum. Cacao is so nourishing. Another good heart medicine for grief, especially too.
Oh, it's so great. Get off the caffeine. Try cacao if you have it, because it really makes a difference.
Yeah, it has helped me so much. Well, thank you. And if anyone would like to have a conversation with you, where could they find you or contact you?
Well, the easiest way to get a hold of me is by my email, which is Daryl, Daryl, at Daryl-Henderson.com. And yeah, if you have any questions, this touched you in any ways, would love to hear about it. And I'm also happy just to talk with people. I love conversating and being of support and helping to guide people along their journey towards healing. We're all capable of it.
Yes, so true. We are all capable. Thank you again.